Welcome everyone to this encore presentation from Out and About. And I have with me three of my favorite people here in Phoenix, Arizona. We have Cris, and in Scottsdale, Arizona, we have my other son, Rick. And in Osaka, Japan, we have Ramone. Welcome everyone to this encore presentation of Out and About. And today, I'd like to bring up the fact that this is December 24th, which is a day that I always celebrate since I can remember, not as a Christmas Eve thing, but as the birthday of my dad. My dad, Gabriel Castillo Romero, was born in Phoenix, Arizona on December 24, 1914. Arizona was just a brand new state, having just been a state for just 2 years. He was born, and later he was christened at St. Mary's Basilica in downtown Phoenix, Arizona, which I've performed there several times, and my brother David was at one time the official organist at St. Mary's Basilica. Anyway, we always, on Christmas Eve, instead of doing Christmas celebrations like most families did, we'd have a big birthday celebration for my dad. And I look forward to this for a couple of reasons. First, of course, I was always happy to have a birthday party with cake and ice cream and all that kind of stuff. But also, after my dad opened his birthday presents, we would always talk him into him letting us open at least one Christmas present. And he would laugh and always let us open a Christmas present as a part of his birthday celebration. And it was a great thing because once we started opening a present, by the time all of us went around opening a present, pretty soon we did a second present, and sometimes we opened them all without even having to wait till Christmas. So we always enjoyed Christmas Eve celebration on those two reasons. It's Christmas Eve, and the other is because it was my dad's birthday. So I think that all of you guys, probably Ramone and Cris and Rick, didn't live long enough to enjoy as much of the experiences that I had with my dad. But I think all of you share his legacies and have things in common that with him that he enjoyed and you enjoy as well. And so I kind of like to just start this conversation by saying everybody get a chance to express something that they enjoyed sharing with my dad.
Okay, I'll go first. I always enjoyed sharing McDonald's Happy Meals and donuts. That was something that was kind of our thing. I would go to the shop and I would also get taken to McDonald's and I'd play in the playground and go to the coffee shop and get donuts. And so I do know that he had a penchant for donuts and for hamburgers, both of which I have carried along that tradition.
Yep, that's true. Me too.
And I can say I can, I only got out there like once or twice a year. And Cris, of course, was younger. And even RV, who had the most time with him of the three of us, it was short. But one of the amazing things about your father, about Grandpa, was that he was like a great ship. He was like a great boat because it really disturbs the water behind it. And there was a huge wake behind Grandpa, after he passed. You felt his impact for years and years and years in the family and in so many ways. It's like this great ship had passed, and we're still feeling the waves from that even now, So that's just one of the things that impacts me, because I think while I don't exactly have many memories per se with him, somehow that impact, that wake that traveled after him, that followed him, still feeling that, still coming to understand that.
Whenever I see Cris working at home, fixing something, or when I see him doing his engineering work on the internet, and when we do our audiovisual presentations, I think of two people, my brother Ruben, and I also think about my dad, because my dad had a great love of technology. It was always his dream to become an audio engineer. And so I think Cris carries on this legacy of his engineering. And so Cris, maybe you'd like to share your love of technology and what you have in common with my dad.
Yeah, it definitely started, obviously, as Ramone mentioned, I was very young, and 86 when he passed away. So my direct involvement in having, working with him in that capacity was a little low because I was so young. But it definitely translated, through Ruben, as you mentioned. Ruben had a love of technology. He had a love of obviously ham radio. It was something that they had in common, and something that they loved to do was either, not just talking over ham radio, but the practice of working, fixing radios, putting up and building antennas and electronics.
A lot of antennas, yeah.
Of course. And so that's something that I, not so much on the radio side, but on the audio side.
You could always spot the Romero house in the neighborhood because it was the house that had a lot of radio antennas on top of it. Big, tall radio antennas that my dad and Ruben would put up there.
Yep. And so, Ruben definitely carried on that tradition, and a lot of the work that I do now, as far as, building computers, doing audio work and video on computers and editing and that kind of stuff, is the type of stuff that I used to do with Ruben, and kind of a direct, lineage from his hobbies that he shared with Grandpa Gabe. And, I'll just say one more thing, which is that, my memories that I do have of Grandpa, one of the main memories that I think we could all relate to was his workshop. And so when you would go in the house there at 2445, you had off the living room was at one point was Ruben's room, right? And then later was Grandpa's workshop. And so he always had his project desk with all of the electronics laid out and a bench vise and all of his tools. And so that was always one of my favorite things to do, was to hang out in there and to see the wiring and the electronics and the tools and the projects that were in process in there. And so that's definitely something I carry forward. Now, the mess obviously is a part of that process, and it's very difficult to be organized in that way. And so that is another trait that I maybe inherited, was always having a project in process and always having some things laid out on the table and in things that I'm be working on. So that's definitely one of those things that I can relate to the most.
Yeah. Another thing, since you mentioned Ruben, is that my dad had a great love of family. Anytime he can get the family engaged in a project, it would always make him really happy. He used to tell me in Spanish that when we would work with each other on projects, it was like one hand washing the other hand. You work together with both hands. And so when it comes to family and family togetherness and all this type of thing, I think of my dad, because every year we'd always go to San Diego to visit his brothers and his sister, my cousins, and we'd always enjoy a lot of fellowship with everybody as a family. That happened whenever my dad came into town. And I know, Ramone, with your work that you've been doing with your artwork, you have captured some of the love that my dad had for the family.
Yeah, I mean, that's been it's been incredible, and talking to you and your brothers, and then talking to the extended family that I've gotten to know, just beginning to know really in the last 2 years. Everybody has this wonderful image, this wonderful memory of him, that he was really nice, that he was hardworking, that he loved his family. And it's like actually everyone was proud of him and felt he was like the best in the family. And it was surprising, because usually we'll say that about like our own point in their family, or our own person. But I would hear this from second cousins and first cousins once removed, and they just had this glowing memory of him. And it's like I said, it's like that big ship, that just has that wake that influences everything behind it, and it's just traveling on today. Jumping back here, I just wanted to comment on the antennas. That's what I put in Ruben's picture here.
Yeah.
The antennas. Yeah, I remember, of course, with my father putting up antennas on Ruben's roof, and I remember all the radios around. I don't remember how much Grandpa was into that stuff, but I know my dad and Ruben were. did have a ham license for a short time, but the electronics was not really my thing. I wasn't that interested in those types of things for reasons I won't get into. But I'll tell you, in Japan, actually, for someone who's a little bit technologically inept or backward, we have an expression here. We say, "I'm an analog person," instead of stereo, I suppose. But what I remember with Grandpa, I remember less so the technology sitting around. I remember the model airplanes that he was building, that he had working. I remember the smell of the whatever type of fuel he used for that. And I remember once finding this little wheel that had been so worn down, it was like a little rubber smooth donut. And I used to just carry it around in my pocket all the time. And I had gotten that from somewhere in his shop. In specific, I remember just impressions of him, at the table. I remember his, he drank coffee, didn't he?
Yep.
I remember his coffee pot because it used to whistle. And as a little kid, that was just the coolest thing. I used to just sit there and wait for it to, wait for it to whistle. I loved watching that. And I remember the one conversation I can remember having with him was, I guess it was about second grade. I came to visit Phoenix after busting my lip in a bicycle accident, and everyone joked that it looked like a duck because it was swollen up, and I had to put vitamins on it. And at the same time, I was still wearing this hospital band that they put around your wrist when you're checked into the hospital. And like a kid, I just kept wearing it even though I was out of the hospital because I thought it was cool. And in the driveway, between those two palm trees, I was there with Grandpa, and he saw that I was wearing that, and it was familiar to him because he had been in the hospital so many times because of his heart conditions. And I remember him commenting that, if you get hurt again or you get injured again, they'll take it off, or when they send you back, they'll put a red one on you. Because the one I had was like kind of a hospital green color, but he says, they'll put a red one on you. And I just remember like, whoa, like it was a little ominous or something. But it sucks. That's the only conversation I can remember actually having with him there in the driveway. I wish there was more.
Since you mentioned the driveway, and I picture the driveway in my mind, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about the driveway is the basketball thing that I put up because my dad wanted me to put up a basketball standard so that Rick could learn how to play basketball. Rick, you might want to pick up on that.
Yeah, I remember I was really into watching the Phoenix Suns, and that's a curse that I've still carried. I'm a Suns fan. So every season has ended in heartache and misery for me, but he didn't know about that, obviously. He knew that I was enjoying basketball. And I also think it's because that movie Teen Wolf came out. And so, of course, that's the Michael J. Fox movie where he turns into a werewolf and plays basketball. And so I just thought basketball was really cool, and I wanted to play. And then I remember seeing in the patio behind some furniture, I think it was a big table or something, like just this little bit of white. And so I moved the furniture, and I don't know if it was Jeff that saw it first or me or whatever, but it was a basketball backboard. So, beautiful white with the square on it, and it didn't have a hoop at that time. And so I kept going every day, and I'd be looking at it, and I'd be like, oh, I wonder who that's for. And he may have even told me it was for Johnny, which of course was the good boy that always got whatever he wanted because Johnny was the good boy. Anyways, so for a long time, I remember just wanting to see what was going to happen with that basketball. And eventually you did put it up actually started in the backyard, I think, before we got the pole. And so we had a bunch of old doors. I remember we laid out in the backyard to make kind of like a makeshift basketball court, and we had the basket and the hoop there at first, I think, and then we finally got it set up in the front yard. So that was definitely something that he wanted me to do. Unfortunately, I never got very good at it. As anybody who's played basketball with me will tell you, I'm not a natural basketball player, but I can defend pretty well because I get very sweaty, and people don't like to get too close to me when I'm that sweaty.
I'll vouch for that.
Well, I know that, you share the love of sports that my dad had. And I remember once you told me when the first time you entered the Phoenix Marathon on New Year's Day about your experience when you were running past the Arizona State Capitol. You said you felt the presence of my dad jogging alongside of you.
Absolutely. Well, I've felt that many times from him or Ruben or just family members. I mean, they kind of accompany you on certain things, and their voice is still with you. And I'll be out on the golf course sometimes, and I might hear Grandpa say, "Hey, use your head here. Don't be stupid."
Yeah.
Hopefully,
I've heard that a few times myself.
Yeah, it's a prevalent voice.
A lot, doesn't he?
He also was involved in creating Papago Park in the Public Works program, and Papago has one of my favorite golf courses in here in Arizona, and so we played there many times. And so I always think about him there. I think his spirit is strong at the park and in those areas, and so I've always been very fond of it. And in general, I've shared his love of baseball. That was my first love. Actually, I always loved playing baseball. I can remember having, played catch with him in the front yard a few times. That was always a real treat because our yards intersected, so our front yard met up to their front yard. And so Chris and Jeff and I spent a lot of hours out in the front yard playing catch and throwing the ball around. And every once in a while, I remember Grandpa came out with his old mitt that had like all the fingers in it, barely had anything. It was just a giant hand, no weapon. And he would catch with us. And I seem to remember he also bought me one time a wiffle ball launcher. So I had it was like a reservoir, and you could put like 4 wiffle balls in it, and then it had a pedal, and the ball would go down there, and then you would stomp on the pedal, and then you could hit it. And I mean, for hours, I was entertained, pretending like I was hitting home runs in the front yard with that plastic ball and plastic bat.
Oh, that's great memories. I know that my dad, when he played baseball in high school, he was one of the best players, and he always played catcher because there's 2 things that he loved being a catcher. One is that he could kind of make fun of the guys that came up to the plate to kind of get their timing thrown off. He would kind of tease them and get to them. And my dad had a really good sense of humor. He could really get a good zinger at you there. So he'd like to get these kind of mixed up. And the other thing is he liked playing it because he felt that the catcher was the strategic player on the field. He called the pitches, threw the ball when the guy was trying to steal a base, all that. And he enjoyed having that kind of strategic control. And as I think back and I see and hear your stories, Chris speaking about the love of technology and engineering and the antennas and all that type of thing, ham radio, and Ramone not only sharing the family experiences that Dad had with us individually, but also hearing from other cousins, my cousins, their experiences with him, and they all attest that he had a tremendous love of family, and then of course his love of sports was always there. I mean, he played tennis all the way up to the time he died. Actually, a couple of days before he died, he was playing tennis, which was one of his favorite sports, and baseball, of course, and he loved watching basketball. He wasn't that much into football, but he enjoyed it to the point of watching it every Sunday. So his love of sports, his love of family, his love of technology, all those legacies are carrying forth with you guys right now. Before we end this conversation, I'd like to give everybody a chance to go around and give one last memory of Dad in celebration of his birthday. I'll just say this to close this part off. Through the years, my dad died when I was 35, but for the first 35 years of my life, I remember him having tremendous joy when he was around his grandkids. When Ramone and Gabe would come over in the summertime and spend time with him, he just got a kick out of that. And the time that he spent with Rick, taking him to the donut shop with him, with his friends to have coffee. And then with Chris, being so little, he just liked to have Cris lay on top of his chest, and he would kind of tease you when you were on top of his chest here, because you would just fit perfectly there, and he'd be watching TV and be, teasing you all the time. He had tremendous fun and happy times with all you guys, and it really is nice to hear you speak about these things, because it reminds me of those happy times as well. So let's go around the clock, and we'll start with Ramone, and we'll take it, and we'll end with Rick.
Yeah, just hearing RV talk about the baseball and things like that. I remember being in that room next to the bathroom, which I guess that was his room. It was kind of blue in hue, and like there were all these trophies on the wall, or like on these shelves. I remember tennis trophies and baseball trophies. I don't remember really talking with him about that or anything. I remember that kind of more, I guess, after he passed. But I remember like going to Phoenix Firebirds games with RV, and he'd take his mitt and try and catch a fly ball kind of thing. And I don't know, it's just very interesting hearing about a lot of these things and discovering a lot more of them. Running across a photo of me and him together. And I can't remember those times at all, but he got to enjoy those times with me, and I'm happy to remember that. I'm happy to know that he got to see us and he got to enjoy being with us. And though I wish I could remember more, what I have is good and is precious. And just as a last little baseball picture, I'm gonna share this picture of him. He's down here in the corner playing as catcher. He actually grew up playing with his family, as I learned, because I've talked to relatives here and there, and I came across this interview with Josefina, who was his sister-in-law, and she had said that they used to play baseball in the street when they were little. Her brothers and sisters and him and his brothers, they used to play baseball, and he would play catcher and she would pitch to him, and he would hit really well even then. She said he hit really hard. I know perhaps you have stories about how hard he could hit. It's just amazing. He was such a character when you consider like these legends are still being told, somewhat 30 years later and stuff, and we'll keep him going because he was worth it. He was good.
I remember my mother said that my father was somewhat unpopular in his baseball team because he would always hit so many home runs, and they only had one baseball, and so whenever he hit a home run, they'd have to go out there and find it, and so they got to the point that they didn't like him as much because he was always hitting home runs. He was the home run king. Cris, why don't you give us your last final impressions about the legacies that my father has carried out with you?
Yeah, I think that one legacy that we all kind of wish hadn't skipped the second generation was his ability with, obviously, automotive repair. I think we've all been challenged in that regard, and we, have a hard time picking up a wrench and doing those, simple, airing the tires is one thing, topping off the oil or fluids is another thing. But, obviously he had a tremendous ability mechanically. Now I've gotten a little bit of that, I like to do some mechanical type, physical type of work, and in the line of work that I do, I think it harkens back to that because I enjoy putting equipment together and making installation of whether it's computer systems or audio video systems and things like that. And so that's one thing that I always kind of think about when I'm working on those kinds of projects. Even though I don't have maybe necessarily the aptitude with automotive repairs as he did, I still feel like it's a little bit of that shines through.
Absolutely. I can see, when I see you working on things, especially on computer stuff and electronics, I can see him diving into that type of thing. He used to like that a lot. RV, why don't you close us out with this birthday celebration with your last thoughts about Dad?
Well, talking about legacy, I can see just from, seeing everybody on the screen here, that one of the legacies that I have definitely carried along of Grandpa Romero is his good looks. probably more so than anybody else. And I remember he was famous for saying he wishes he had been born rich instead of good looking.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I've felt that way many times. And we talk about, there's a lot that he and I share in common, and I can tell that his influence is still, even though I only spent about 7 years with him, that still resonate with me today, ways that he helped to shape my personality and my interests. And I did play catcher in Little League. I wasn't very good at it, but I did do, and I carried that tradition as well. I used to try and give the other players a razzing, and I enjoyed that. I definitely did. And I remember that grandma she had a ball, and she told me a story a while, and she would show me his pictures. And Ramone, maybe you can illustrate this. They used to call him the fireman, according to grandma, because he always wore a red cap. And so when she would go and watch him play, they gave her one of the home run balls once, and she said that she held it close, and she was so proud of him. So I know that she was very proud to be connected with him because of his prowess on the field, and everybody looked up to him for that. And for her, that was a great source of pride and affection. And I wish that I had inherited some of those athletic abilities, just like the automotive fixing trait, which I certainly haven't. I mean, I'm listening to Cris, and he's saying top off fluid and air up tires. And I'm like, man, I can't even do that. I gotta go to Discount Tires and get my tires balanced. One thing that I do say, what's that?
Well, I guess it skipped a couple of generations. I can't do it either.
But one thing that I can say is that, we share an interest, Grandpa and I, in European sports cars. And he was an Audi man, but I think that had he seen my Mercedes SLK 300, that he would have become a Mercedes man. So
I'm not sure about that, because it's kind of small getting in there. He kind of liked to have the room space,
Right. Well,
what would he have said of your Fiat? I remember that. Okay.
Sure. I think he probably wouldn't have been as impressed with the Fiat, but I think he might have thought it looked cool. But I gotta believe that he loved to drive, and probably even drive fast, and those are things that I enjoy doing. But I'll close with this, because I'm a nurse practitioner, and he was a mechanic, and there's actually a lot of similarities between those things. And when you consider the customer service involved, I kind of run my own business as well. And instead of figuring out what's wrong with a person's car, I try and figure out what's going on with their health, and give them some meaningful recommendations. And I also like to think that I think outside of the box like he did, and sometimes it wasn't the big fix that his customers needed and the big job. It was just a little tweak here and there, or a recommendation, or something that he could do and make it easier for them, so they didn't have to get an expensive fix. And so I like to think about that when I'm in my day-to-day work as well.
All right. And I can see that and feel that same thing as well. I know that my mother was extraordinarily proud of my father's accomplishments. The fact that he came so far with his own career and success in business was only a part of it. I think she was also proud of the way that he worked with people, worked with his family, and his basically his just joy for living, his enjoyment just to go out and have another day doing the things that he enjoyed doing, which is working with his customers, flying his model airplanes, being on the ham radio, watching football or basketball on television. All these things gave him great joy and happiness. And so on his birthday today, December 24th, we wish to honor his legacies and his memories. And I want to thank all of you guys for participating in this discussion, and wish you all a very Merry Christmas tomorrow when you get out there. If you want to follow the old family tradition, you're allowed to open one Christmas present tonight on Christmas Eve, but just one. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as they say in ham radios, 77s or 73s and 88s. Have a good Christmas, Ramone. Good to see you. Rick, And Chris in Arizona, enjoy your sunny day on Christmas. And this is Paps Romero saying goodbye to everyone from Out and About Radio, and have a good Christmas, everyone.